Today, Alden Do Rosario, CEO of CustomGPT.ai, is joined by Lee Gaul, a thought leader in large language models and generative AI. Check the description for a link to their bios. In this interview, Alden and Lee discuss a recent benchmark where his company beat OpenAI and other industry giants, setting a new standard for answer accuracy. Listen in to learn more.
Alden, hello. How are you?
Hey, great. How's it going, Lee?
I'm doing really well. It's nice to meet you here. And I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about, the custom GPT and as well as some recent news that you're announcing, which is a pretty exciting third-party validation about the tool. So I'm really excited, but I think to maybe start it off, can you tell me a little bit about your background and why you decided to build this tool?
Yeah, so our background is basically in search and ad targeting. And about 12 months ago, we saw ChatGPT come out. And then we said to ourselves that, ChatGPT is cool, but what's even cooler is when you do ChatGPT with your own data. And so that created the concept of like a GPT with your own data. And over the last couple of months, that thing now has a name called RAG,
Yeah.
Retrieval Augmented Generation. Somebody came out with a name for it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand out in the general audience. I think a good way to kind of talk about it is when ChatGPT first came out, um, a lot of people were really confused by the fact that they would ask it a question and it wouldn't be able to answer that question. It would, who won the Super Bowl in 1984? And it would go like, oh, it was, the Patriots or something like that. And people go, oh, this thing it's no good. This is if it can't answer that simple question, then the technology is all hype and it's not a really exciting new product. And I think that we all sort of know that that's not true, but there's a real confusing reason why people reacted that way. And I think you're going to understand where I'm going with this is that people were treating language models like search engines. Tell me a little bit about why they're not search engines.
Yeah, the reason they are not search engines is because think of language models like the giant autocompletes, right? They've just ingested the last 5,000 years of knowledge. And then when you ask it a question, they are pretty much guessing the next word, right? So when you ask it like who won the World Cup, they are basically based on whatever information they had ingested over the last 5,000 years, they would go ahead and guess. They would say like the next World Cup, right? And so it's like an autocomplete where the next word is being guessed. That is why
Yeah,
you will see even in ChatGPT that it types out one word at a time because
right. Yeah, I remember playing with GPT-3 through the Hugging Face interface a few years back, and typing and having it really actually feel like that experience you're talking about right now. It really was like an autocomplete. It would start writing a poem or writing about a topic, and the next couple of words would come up, and then it would stop, and you'd have to kind of prompt it to continue, and it would go, and eventually would fall off the tracks and start to make no sense, right? But what's happened since then is, OpenAI and other companies, Google certainly, um, figured out a way to train these models to be really good at completing documents, right?
exactly.
Yeah, so that's to call it a fancy autocomplete is a very accessible way for people to understand it. But as I'm sure at the end of the day, these tools they have to actually understand the language in order to predict that next word. And that's really interesting. And that's really powerful. And when we instruction tune them and we do reinforcement learning, they become these very powerful assistant models, right? And
Exactly.
so yeah, and I mean, it sounds like you are like me when you saw that OpenAI had basically, you know, decided to throw caution to the wind and release ChatGPT, that it was actually this really impressive tool, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And for us, I think the big realization was that, both the limitation of ChatGPT, wherein it doesn't know about your information,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we knew that businesses would be most excited about the ChatGPT, but with their own information, right?
Yeah,
When somebody says, can you tell me about your pricing, right? You want that answer to come from your own website's pricing page, right?
yeah.
And the other part that emerged along the way was this thing called hallucination, where
Mm-hmm.
you don't want these language models making things up, right? So from a
Right.
business perspective, if you have pricing on your pricing page and somebody asks what is your pricing, the AI better respond exactly based on what was on your pricing page.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly. And that's really a big component of what you're talking about with custom GPT, and I want to definitely get to that. But I also want to really kind of highlight again this moment that we're in with language models and how really seemingly limitless the potential is for just the domain of AI generally right now, which is being kind of you know, the springboard is language models and is things like Gemini and Claude and ChatGPT and the Llama family of models and all the open source things that have come from that. Like I think we're really sitting on a revolution here, and the hallucination is another thing that I think hasn't quite made its way into the public consciousness as a not a bug, but a feature of language models in some way, right? And
right.
I wonder if you agree on that kind of in that take.
Correct. So there are a couple of aspects to this. One is the consumer aspect to it, right? Where normal consumers go to something like ChatGPT and then they see things hallucinating and they're like, oh my gosh, this thing is making stuff up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the business side of it, right? When it comes to the business side, the tolerance for hallucination is much, much lower,
Yeah.
right? When you have a lawyer reading a contract, right, or an AI helping a lawyer read a contract, there is
Uh-huh.
no scope for any sort of hallucination,
Right.
right? The data has to come from within whatever the contract text is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the ground truth knowledge is, right? So that's where what is happening at the LLM level versus what happens above it, where somebody like us comes into the picture,
Yeah.
anti-hallucination becomes really important, due to which we ended up building the world's best anti-hallucination solution because of
Right.
sheer, like, sheer sort of force with which businesses told us that hallucination is important.
Yeah. And I think that that is a really interesting component of what you claim here. And at this point, um, when somebody claims that they've developed a system that doesn't do um, a thing like hallucinations, when the rest of the world is saying it's still a big problem, you have to kind of back it up. So for to take a step back here, what you've done is essentially built a tool in custom GPT, which is a no code tool. No code means anyone can come in, build this product out themselves. Like if you can create like a LinkedIn profile or a Facebook profile or something like that, you can probably build a custom GPT, right? And what your solution does is a sort of very common new approach called RAG, right? Retrieval Augmented Generation. And for the audience that doesn't fully know that or isn't kind of immersed in the lingo, that really means, as Alden has been saying, that instead of drawing from the large language models, learning of the past 5,000 years of human knowledge from the internet, it's pulling on the data that you care about, your company's data, your vast repository of documents, of videos and audio transcripts, and really kind of any kind of content that is valuable and that you want an organization to have access to. You have that ability to query a custom GPT and have it return the answer. So is that like a pretty fair, first of all, kind of overview of that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You nailed it exactly. And that's what it is. Just pulling your own data very easily with no code and being able to then deploy it on your website or for your own internal use,
Yeah.
employee productivity, things like that.
Yeah. And I mentioned that this is something that many companies are doing. I mean, OpenAI, you can open up, you can create a enterprise OpenAI account, you can create a RAG-based chatbot, Google Vertex AI, you can create all of this integration that'll pull from all of your documents and things like that. RAG is like the hot thing right now. Everyone seems to be doing it. And even at the foundation model level, these companies are saying, look, bring your data in here. It's secure, and you can use this version of, Claude 3 or of Gemini or, ChatGPT. Just it's an LLM for your data. So, I mean, this is something that's happening all over, and the big companies themselves are doing it. So, what's the difference between them and what you're doing?
Correct. So for us, right, RAG is all we do. We specialize in RAG. So to draw an analogy, if you look at the LLMs, they would be like, Intel processors, right? But on top of Intel processors, you have an operating system.
Mhm.
RAG is similar. Like we sit on top of the LLMs and we specialize only in RAG and everything that matters related to RAG efficiency, to RAG relevancy, to
Mhm.
RAG ingestion. So almost think of us as RAG operating system, right?
Yeah.
How do you bring in your data? How do you make sure the answers are relevant? How do you make sure there's no hallucination? How do you
Mhm.
deploy it to, you know, effect and on
Yeah.
your, so that is the key big difference, right? And the other aspect of it you asked is how are we different from a Claude or an OpenAI, right? Their focus is on making the LLMs better, right? That's
Mhm.
why you see this race going on between GPT-4 versus Gemini versus Claude 3,
Yeah.
right? Our focus is on our RAG operating system and everything that makes it good, right? Relevancy, anti-hallucination. Like I don't think OpenAI is even thinking about hallucination right now because it's honestly it's not their job to do so. It's their job to make the LLM more efficient and creative.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, it feels like hallucinations are not a solved issue in the world of language models. And, so when I hear from someone that they have solved hallucinations, it makes me skeptical, to be very transparent, and I have to say, listen, I read all the research. I look at what the fundamental issues are with the transformer architecture and with the fact that language models don't have any specific ground truth that guides them, and even ways for them to be to do sort of self-supervised reinforcement learning, and the ways to kind of probe different nodes to understand within hidden layers where hallucinations happen. That's not settled science. It hasn't been solved. So how are you claiming to be able to do that?
Exactly, right? So the key to this is all the information about hallucination till now has been at the LLM level,
Mm,
right? And the LLM level is probably like the worst place to try and tackle hallucination.
mm,
Hallucination is something that is very specific to the customer data and what the customer considers as hallucination. So it
yeah.
has to to be solved at the RAG layer rather than the LLM layer, right?
Okay.
That's where, that is why we look at it as a RAG problem. And that is why we've solved it at the RAG,
Yeah.
right? And then
Oh,
the
yeah.
other aspect of it, and I understand why anybody is skeptical, right? Is because if OpenAI and Google, they haven't solved hallucination, how is this small company in Boston,
Right.
claiming to do a better job at hallucination? And the answer
Yeah.
is we specialize in RAG.
Yeah.
And to solve hallucination, you better have lots and lots of customers and data that are talking to you in hand to hand combat about
Hmm.
hallucination.
Yeah. Like
That
a company, like
sorry,
somebody like MIT, for example.
exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
MIT, when they came to us, they made it very clear that hallucination is their number one focus,
Yeah.
right? Because they have a brand to uphold, they have highly authoritative data, right?
Hmm.
They could not afford to have the RAG or the AI responses hallucinate, right?
Yeah.
That is just one example. We have people and customers where the threshold for hallucination is even smaller.
Hmm.
Medical field, therapy, health, right? These are use cases where you just cannot have the AI hallucinate. And I usually say that hallucination is like security, right?
Yeah.
7% effective is as good as 100% useless.
Yeah.
So when it comes to hallucination, it has to hit 99.9 or above. It's going to be similar to, like, uptime for all of us old guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just am thinking of this analogy right now, but it actually in the brain itself, the two hemispheres are constantly at battle, and there's one, the right hemisphere is its tendency is to actually be like a hallucinatory machine, like it views everything and your connection with reality as really irrelevant, and it's this kind of purely creative thing, and then that left hemisphere of your brain is always bringing it back and grounding it in reality and grounding it in sort of the prefrontal cortex and all these kind of high domain decision making things. And so, even in nature and in our brains, there's this tension between the two. And it sounds like what you're talking about is really building that left brain on top of the right hemisphere that's bringing this powerful component of the brain, which is the LLM in this sort of, tough analogy, into shape and having it be much more focused on facts and being reliable, and supposed to just thinking that everything is pure energy, and that basically the hippie part of the brain versus the the businessman part of the brain.
That is an amazing analogy. I never thought of it. I'm going to steal this because
Well, it's recorded, so you'll know where it came from here.
exactly. No, this is such a
Yeah.
great way of, yeah, and you're totally right. LLMs are meant to be creative, and we are expected to be ground truth. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
left and right brain analogy is perfect.
So, but Alvin, listen, here's the big thing that I want to get to here is, it, it's always tough to take your word for it because it's your company and you're the founder. So you have been talking. I've been talking with you guys about this benchmark that came out, which you guys are pretty excited about, and I want to learn a little bit more about that and see if you can explain a little bit about the results and why that matters.
Yeah. So we were very happy when the benchmark came out. So there is this independent company, tonic.ai, which has created a benchmark for RAG applications, right?
Mm,
The benchmark is able to compare multiple RAG applications on the thing that matter for RAG, right? Answer relevancy, hallucination, and things like that, right? So they independently ran our system against OpenAI, Google Vertex, Amazon, and Cohere, right? And the main point in an end-to-end RAG system is answer relevancy, because all of these other things are nice, but at the end of the day, answer relevancy is king, right? And we were very thrilled to see that in that independent benchmark, we came out on top, like with some good numbers out there.
Yeah, I mean, so I read the report and I dug in a little bit more, and I mean, it's pretty impressive. I do think that it's important to kind of call out the fact that the broader public probably has a hard time believing that a little company out of Boston, not that great innovation doesn't come out of Boston. I mean, again, MIT is a Massachusetts based organization and school, but people find it hard to believe that anybody can win or outperform these big companies that are doing all this crazy research and innovation. So can you dig a little bit deeper into like how much? I know when I read benchmarks and read different papers, somebody will really, tout the fact that they have a 0.02% win rate over another competitor, and that's their big, that's the big thing that they want to run around and scream from the rooftops. Is that what's going on here, or was it more compelling than that?
No, I feel there are a couple of factors going on here, right? The first one is from day one, which was 12 months ago, our focus was on RAG, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is what we do, right? That's item number one. The second part of it is our background is in search and ad targeting.
Mm-hmm.
In both of these areas, the quality of the targeting and the quality of the answers is supreme,
Yeah.
right? So from day one, we said our North Star metric is the answer relevancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you make it your North Star, it means that every decision that you take has to focus on that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that was the second thing that happened. The third thing that happened, which I feel we were pretty lucky, is we signed up a lot of customers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that
Yeah.
gives you a data moat, right? In
Yeah.
something like relevancy, you need customers telling you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yes, you can sit and guess as much as you want, but there is no substitute to real human customer feedback.
Yeah.
So those factors like created a system where we always kept those North Star metrics in place, right?
Yeah.
So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, remember, RAG sits on top of the LLM.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, it is more related to search than it is
Mm-hmm.
related to AI,
Mm.
right? If you actually, we don't really have too many like, hardcore ML, machine learning, and all these neural net type people, but we have great search and advertising people.
Yeah.
And those are the factors that are required for RAG, right?
Yeah.
So I feel that is the reason that we were able to meet the benchmarks. And that doesn't mean that, it's technically possible that OpenAI puts 35 people on RAG and crushes us like a little ant, right?
Right.
But for now, we have that little advantage. We made it our focus, right? And
Yeah.
the analogy that I'll give you is basically Mid Journey, right? Mid Journey was six people, and yet they, created one of the best image generation systems around,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if you focus on something and make it your North Star,
Yeah.
there is a good chance that you might end up doing a good job about it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that
Right.
Google will not throw 1,000 people at image generation and create something better than Mid Journey does.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting because I think you talked about a moat, and having a moat, and then you've been very sort of forthcoming about the fact that for people out there in the audience that don't really know about moats, a moat is part of this thing called the five forces analysis competition, and one of them is there's a moat that should protect your business from the power of suppliers, the bargaining power of suppliers, the bargaining power of clients, the threat of a replacement product. In the AI world, that threat of the replacement product is a huge component that many AI startups are struggling with, are going to be really wiped out over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, because a company could come along like Google or OpenAI and decide to turn on that very feature, and then people would say, why would I jump out of that product and go to somebody else's product when I can just stay there? And that moat thing is really what I think about a lot when I think about AI technologies that are out there. Are you a thin wrapper solution, or are you providing something that is expert, has unique value? And it sounds like for you, the secret sauce, which I'm not going to ask you to sort of reveal in any kind of specific way, is how you are approaching RAG and how you are making sure that the solution is grounded in the data and that it doesn't go off topic. Because, one of the biggest things, and I'll just tell you, I'm a huge AI fan. I know a lot about it. I have some good experience in it. But one of the things that's really impressed me the most is using this tool called Chat PDF, which now is almost like an irrelevant tool, but I go back to it all the time because what they do is they ingest a PDF in seconds. Doesn't matter if it's a huge long research paper, and then allow me to query that research paper. And it's just using the OpenAI API, and it's very good. And I get a lot of value out of that. However, I can get this thing to go off topic and to hallucinate. And so in that sense, I understand its limitations. And there's something different about what you're doing here.
Correct. Uh, Heard about Chat PDF, love it. That's an example of a good thin wrapper, right? But there is a reason that Chat PDF will hallucinate, right? And that is under the hood, what PDF is doing is basically RAG,
Yeah.
right? And RAG has 5 core components in it, right? It's all sometimes called a RAG pipeline.
Yeah.
And the 5 components, just I don't want to get too technical, but there's a component around chunking the data. There's a component around storing it in a vector database. There are components around handling the query. There is a component around reordering the chunking. There is a component around actually giving the answers, right? So there are multiple, think of it like a little pipeline under the hood. And if somebody who's building this pipeline is not focusing on hallucination at each and every part of the pipeline,
Mhm.
it will become like a leaky bucket,
Mm.
and you will see hallucination leaking across the various stages, right?
Yeah.
That is the key. Actually, you said don't give your secret sauce. I'm not giving away my secret sauce, but what I'm telling is that think of it like a pipeline and make sure that every aspect of the pipeline, the hallucination is plugged.
Yeah.
That,
So yeah, I
yeah.
mean that so I love that, because that's a kind of simple way to think about it. But I have another question for you, and I don't want to push you too hard, but I mean, look, OpenAI has been considered, the biggest innovator in AI in the last year and a half. I would argue that's not really the case, actually, but they've got the mind share and they're the most sort of popular. They have that sort of um, first to market advantage of everyone knowing, ChatGPT and all the rest of it. Um, and GPT-4 is still arguably the most powerful language model out there, although it's really not for long. And I think that they're going to have to do something different. And there was some volatility there in November with Sam Altman, their CEO, being ousted and then brought back in, and showed that they were kind of all over the place. There's some instability with them. Are customers stuck using OpenAI as the back end for your tool, or is there an opportunity to use another kind of model to power your RAG solution?
So from day one, we used GPT-4. Day one, we did not even support 3.5 or anything less in
Yeah.
our system, right? And moving forward, we are not stuck to GPT-4.
Mm.
We will be stuck to whoever is the best when it comes to reasoning,
Okay.
right? That is the key element. If tomorrow we are able to prove that Claude is better or Gemini is better or whoever OpenAI comes up with GPT-5,
Yeah.
right? Then we will happily move to that.
So it's not like a full, you'd have to just like tear down the foundations and start from
Oh,
scratch.
absolutely not. In fact,
You can plug in the back end.
yeah, we already support Llama. We support 3.5, right? For people in certain use cases that
Yeah.
need it, right? But there's
Yeah.
nothing in a RAG pipeline. It's literally like, you can run your Microsoft operating system on Intel, or you can run it on any other chip. It's
Yeah.
very similar to that.
Okay. Um, and I mean, so what I'm going to get back a little bit to the benchmark with Tonic. Um, how did that come about? Did you work with them, or did they just sort of happen? Did they just decide to test your solution? Like, how did that end up happening?
Yeah, so that was interesting. Like, so one of the things that was happening, right, is we were getting a lot of feedback from customers saying, your system is really good because we tried it against other systems. And I was like, oh, great, great. Thank you very much. Right. But at some point, I was talking to my engineers and we realized, like, hey, there's one thing saying it qualitatively,
Hmm.
there's another thing being able to say it quantitatively
Yeah.
and like just prove it as well as monitor it over time,
Yeah.
right? So we went in search of, let's see, like who has RAG benchmarks, and there are two emerging, which is Tonic is the main one, and there's another one emerging called Ragas, right?
Hmm.
And so we started playing around with Tonic, and I think I put a comment on the GitHub page, and they said, "Oh, looks like you are another end-to-end RAG solution similar to OpenAI assistants.
Hmm.
So why don't we benchmark you guys?" Right? And so they plugged our code in and they created the benchmark, plugged us in, and they were shocked when they were like, whoa. So the previous high was like 4.0 and we came at 4.4.
Yeah.
And that became a real like David versus Goliath story. And
Wow.
on my side, even though I was thrilled, I too ran the benchmark myself to make sure that it was not a like a accident or something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now we are going to even benchmark it in other data sets to see if this really holds. So
Yeah.
this is going to become a standard benchmark, and from our perspective, we are going to keep running it across other data sets and just monitor the health of the system as such.
Yeah. And I guess as a follow up to that, um, in some of my background, I was working with a company that did AI detection, and one of the issues there was that there was no real benchmarks for testing, detection and an AI's ability to detect another AI's outputs. And once I identified that there was a benchmark there, it kind of gave me this sigh of relief, going like, okay, it's not just us and our internal marketing and everything like that, touting the greatness of this application. There's a benchmark that exists. Is that kind of how it felt on your side?
Absolutely. So what we started off with initially was just the answer relevancy, right? Who has the best answer? But where I see this going, both with Tonic as well as us, is there are other things people care about, right?
Hmm.
They care about hallucination, they care about bias, they care
Hmm.
about toxicity, they care about, prompt injection and threats, right? So what's happening is when the AI responds, there are various stakeholders that care about different things from a benchmarking perspective, right?
Hmm.
The legal department cares about compliance.
Yeah.
So, with every AI response, is there a compliance agent checking the response and giving a
Right.
score? right?
Yeah.
The legal department can keep an eye on how the scores are doing from a legal perspective, right? And like that, there are various stakeholders, there are regulators, there are, the sales team wants to know what is happening in the AI responses, right?
Yeah.
So that is where I see this moving ahead, right? With the benchmarking, like, even though all the focus till now has been on what is the AI saying, the next part of where the industry will evolve will be having these agents that look into what the AI is saying and then monitor them. It's almost the
Right.
equivalent of you saying something, and there are 12 people on the side with notebooks making
Yeah.
notes about what you have just said.
It's like having a human in the loop, but it's an AI in the loop.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Multiple AIs in the loop, right? Right now, even though in our system we have one response going out, there are almost 12 other agents that are then reviewing what the main agent said.
Right. Yeah, it's
So,
interesting.
yeah,
Um, Look, this is it's a very compelling sort of story here, and I think to be really transparent, when I first saw what you were doing, I kind of thought to myself like, gosh, there's no moat here. How can this be anything that is sort of sustainable, compelling, and how can they compete against these big players out there? And I guess the more that we talk about it, um, you've identified something really important, which is the fact that it's not OpenAI or Google or Cohere or Anthropic or Meta's main focus right now to develop the best RAG system out there. They're developing that right brain that we had talked about before, right? And you're optimizing in your expertise on information retrieval principles and what you're bringing from your search and your ad experience. And one thing that I've discovered in my career, I've worked adjacent and within the SEO world, is if anyone understands the intersection between content and data, it's people in the search world. And in fact, it seemed like nobody really even talked about BERT or anything like that except for SEO people. A couple of years ago, when Google released BERT, and then there's Roberta and all of the different NLP systems or natural language processing systems that were out there. It was the search world that really sat up, took notice, and had thoughts on it, and were very interested in that. So it makes sense that you're bringing some of that expertise into this. And I'm sort of comforted in the fact that you guys not only have worked with so many customers, but somebody like MIT. It sort of it lowers that red flag that I've had a bit and said, okay, there's some validation here, especially this third party validation. It's really exciting. So
for what it counts, my master's is in computer science in information retrieval
there you go.
from one of the best universities in the world for information retrieval. UMass Amherst
Yeah,
is top in information retrieval.
yeah,
So, what that counts, maybe that is the root cause of some of this stuff.
yeah. Like I say, I think there's a real tendency for people in information retrieval to be perfectly set up. And actually, I'm seeing a lot of upskilling in the search world for people getting to language modeling and everything else, because it makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of parallels in the technology and even in the programming languages required to be proficient in that world. So yeah, it's not a stretch to see this type of shift or this kind of expertise being applied into the current realm of AI from people with information retrieval backgrounds.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can give you another example of on the moat side, right? Like
Yeah.
we implemented a feature from our customers where they said that if my content changes, can you make sure the bot is in sync with it,
Hmm.
right? So we just implemented something called chain data capture or in common terms, it's a sync feature, right? Because what you don't want happening is you go and change your pricing on your pricing page,
Mhm.
and the bot is still responding based on the old pricing,
Yeah.
right? So these are types of things, and this is just one of 100 such things. Which will OpenAI do it? Will Google do it? Right? Will Google
Mhm.
really build a system that keeps your content on your website and your GPT in sync?
Yeah.
Right? And like this, there are about 100 different customer requested features
Mhm.
that go towards the core of relevancy, hallucination, and like unleashing business value, right?
Yeah.
So that, to me, that is the moat. That is the last mile problems that
Yeah.
we don't know if Google, who's a platform, or OpenAI, who's a platform, will bother like going into that level of depth.
Yeah. Look, Alden, this was really great conversation, very enlightening, and I'm really excited to see where you head next. I came into it feeling one way, and I'm really so far I'm cautiously convinced that this is a pretty compelling value proposition you've got here. So congratulations on this. Congratulations on the benchmark, and hopefully we'll be speaking again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Lee. And your questions and insights were like really fantastic. And once again, I'm going to steal the left brain, right brain.
No
After
problem.
this week.
No problem.
Right.
Great.